When I met Gustavo, I thought I had won the seduction lottery. He was that kind of man who makes you feel warm in your chest and elsewhere with just one look. Tall, charming, always with that pose of someone who commands the world. And with me, oh, he was sweet. He knew exactly how to give me goosebumps with a simple whisper in my ear. At that moment, I thought, that's him, the man who's going to make me lose my mind. Our wedding felt like a soap opera dream. Trips that looked like movie scenes, candlelit dinners in our mansion. And in bed? Well, let's say that Gustavo had a special way of making my worries disappear. But you know how it is, right? When everything seems too good, that's where the danger lies. Soon I started to notice those long hugs that made me melt. They got faster. The intense kisses, they turned into little seals. And the sweet words, they disappeared like smoke. It was then that I started to notice signs, small details, phone calls that ended too quickly, messages that disappeared before I could blink. And his look? I no longer had that naughty glow that made me forget about the world, but I insisted on not believing it. It couldn't be my Gustavo. Or could it? The days passed, and that discomfort in the back of my mind wouldn't leave me alone. Gustavo always had an excuse on the tip of his tongue. Business trips, endless meetings. Meanwhile, I stayed at home, alone, wondering if it was all in my head, or if my instinct was screaming at me to wake up. He was there, but he wasn't there. Present, but absent. It was like he was living a life I couldn't reach, until one night I decided to rekindle the fire. I wore that red dress that he loved, put on the perfume that he said was my trademark, and waited. I waited, and I waited. When he finally arrived late at night, what I saw in his eyes made my stomach turn. There was no desire. There was no surprise. Just a cold tiredness, which didn't suit the man who once made me lose my breath. He gave me a quick kiss, almost like a favor, and went straight to the shower. My heart sank. Gustavo always had that way of grabbing me by the waist and making me feel like I was the most desired woman in the world. Now, everything about him seemed automatic, soulless. After that night, I decided to open my eyes. I started to notice more. The schedules that didn't make sense, the whispered conversations on the cell phone. Even his perfume seemed stronger, as if he was trying to impress someone. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just paranoia. The bomb exploded on a Sunday afternoon. I was organizing his office, something he almost never let me do. As I was arranging the papers on my desk, my fingers found a crumpled note at the bottom of a drawer. Just looking at that piece of paper made my heart start to race. I knew there was something inside there that would change everything. I can't wait to see you again, my love. You make me feel alive. Those words stuck in my mind like a knife. I read and reread, trying to find some kind of excuse for it, but there was no signature. It was direct, intimate, and worst of all, it wasn't for me. My heart froze, and the ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. My fingers trembled, holding that treacherous little piece of paper, which now seemed to carry the weight of all the lies. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to tear that note into 1,000 pieces. But instead, I stood there, frozen, my mind racing a mile a minute, trying to digest what was in front of me. Looking Gustavo in the eye at that moment, impossible. I needed answers, and I needed them now. It was then that I decided, if he was hiding something, I was going to get every secret out of him, even if it destroyed me inside. And that's when I decided to resort to Plan B, hiring a detective. If Gustavo had a double life, he wasn't going to get away with it. Making that call was a mix of liberation and terror. Liberating because finally, I would know the truth. Scary, because what if the truth was worse than I imagined? I got the number a friend had given me. He's discreet, quick, and discovers everything without anyone noticing. It was exactly what I needed. The detective was almost a film noir caricature, tall, impeccable suit, and a voice that seemed to rip out the soul. When we met in that discreet cafe, he got straight to the point. "Are you sure about this? Sometimes the truth hurts more than a lie." I swallowed hard. I knew he was right, but there was no going back. I needed to know. I gave him every detail of Gustavo's routine. Schedules, routes, places where he said he had night meetings, everything. It was like putting together a puzzle with pieces that hurt every time I put them together. And in the days that followed, my life became chaos. Every call from the detective made my heart skip a beat. The tension was eating me up inside. The truth was coming, and I didn't know if I was ready to face it. When the final call came, it was a rainy afternoon. "I have everything you asked for, but we need to talk in person." His voice was thick, as if he already knew this was going to tear me apart. I agreed to meet him at the same cafe, but this time, I knew I would leave there a different person. He arrived, sat down, and placed an envelope in front of me. "Get ready." When I opened it, it was like being punched in the stomach. There was Gustavo, laughing in the car with Marisa. Yes, Marisa, the one I considered almost a sister. They laughed, exchanged looks that said it all. But the worst? One of the photos showed the two entering a motel. My entire body was in shock. My stomach turned. That man, who once made my heart race, was now destroying me mercilessly. And her, look, smiling, confident, as if she had won the prize that was never hers. It was treason, pure, raw, and shameless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything around me, but I held back. The tears came hot, flowing uncontrollably, burning my face like a truth I didn't want, but needed to face. The detective touched my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry, but you needed to know." He was right. The pain was unbearable, but it was the price of truth. When I left that cafe, the rain seemed to punish me as much as my heart, but it wasn't just the rain. They were the tears that fell without mercy. Gustavo had crossed a line that I never, not even in my worst nightmares, imagined he would cross. What to do with that truth, I didn't know. But one thing was clear. Nothing would be the same as before. I waited for Gustavo to get home like someone waiting for a hurricane. The storm outside seemed like a warning of what was to come. He walked through the door, soaking wet, with that tired look of someone who has no idea what is about to happen. He didn't even notice that I was there, sitting in the living room, holding the envelope that carried the end of our story. "We had a rough day at the office," he murmured, without looking me in the eye. The time had come. I couldn't put it off any longer. "Gustavo, sit down. We need to talk." My voice came out steady, but inside my heart was a mess. He stopped, surprised, looked at me and asked, "Did something happen?" I didn't waste time. I threw the envelope on the table with the strength of someone who can no longer bear so much pain. "Yes, it happened, and I think you know very well what it is." Silence swallowed the room. He opened the envelope, saw the photos, and for the first time he seemed to lose control. "This isn't what it seems," he began, with that voice of someone trying to escape the inevitable. But I didn't want to hear it. "Oh no?" Because to me it feels like exactly what it is. Betrayal. My voice cut through the air like a blade, and by his expression, I knew he had been hit. That was when Marisa appeared, in the room. She was crying, her hands shaking, mumbling something about never wanting things to come to this. Pathetic. Gustavo in turn tried to minimize it, saying that everything had been a mistake, that it meant nothing. But at that moment their words were empty. Respect, love, the trust, all of that was gone. That night was a turning point. It was the night I chose myself. I looked at him, at her, and I knew that story was over. I stood up, and with every step I took, I felt like I was regaining a piece of my dignity. Later, as I packed my bags, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Sadness, relief, anger, but above all, strength. I left behind the mansion, the memories, and the man I once thought was the love of my life. All I took with me was my dignity, because deep down I knew this was all I needed to start over. At first it was cruel. The nights were long and empty, as if the silence mocked me. But little by little, something began to change. I started to remember who I was before Gustavo. I went back to doing things that made me happy, things that he never valued or even understood. Little by little, the mirror stopped being my enemy. I looked and saw someone I recognized, a strong, determined, and free woman. People around me started to notice. "You look different," they said. "More alive, more self-possessed. And you want to know?" They were right. When I left Gustavo, it wasn't just a failed marriage that was left behind. I freed myself from something much bigger. The absurd idea that I needed someone to complete me. Today, when I think about him, I don't feel anger or pain. I feel gratitude. Because in losing Gustavo, I found something much more valuable. The incredible woman I always was. The story I lived with him was full of pain, but also full of transformation. Sometimes life rips the ground from under our feet just to teach us how to fly. Being betrayed by someone we trust is like being stabbed in the heart. But, you know what's crazy? It's also the chance to discover a strength you never imagined you had. I remember that night when I left the mansion with my bags in hand. It was one of the most difficult moments of my life, but looking back, I know that every tear shed was a step towards something much greater, freedom. And this freedom brought me something that no relationship could offer: self-love. I learned that we don't need anyone to complete us. We are already whole, complete, powerful, just the way we are. True love, it starts here, inside us. If you are experiencing something like this, listen carefully. No one deserves to be in a relationship where respect and love are left behind. Nobody. Love starts with you. Take the first step. Yes, it can be scary, but the world is full of possibilities, waiting to be discovered by you. I want you to reflect with me. Do you believe that every pain carries a lesson? Or do you think some wounds are too deep to heal? I want to hear your story. Share in the comments. Let's talk. And if this message touched you, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with those who need to hear this. Let's build together a community of strength, courage, and empowerment, because no one has to go through this alone. Until the next video. And remember, you are stronger than you know.